Welcome everyone. This is the first meeting of the Community Scrutiny Review Board, so welcome to new faces and hello to the old, if anybody's still here from the old Scrutiny Board. First of all, can I apologise that on the agenda we have notes of the last meeting, but they were not sent out and they were not available electronically. So my apologies for that. What will happen is that in order for you to have a chance to read them, we won't approve them today, and we can approve them next meeting. But I think if there's any actions from that, Dominic, that you might pick up, and we'll be able to sort of pick those up today. Yeah, okay, so my apologies on that. So, any apologies? I think there's one. Councillor Eyre. Yeah, okay, that's the only person missing from the board, so we're all present apart from Councillor Eyre. That will be noted. Late items to be introduced by the chair. I think both Councillor Atwell and myself would want some discussion, but I think on opening hours of the recycling centre, household recycling centre. And do you want to say something on that?
Yeah, Chair, if I could just ask that to be put on any of the business or at the end of the meeting, please, so we can have a firm discussion regarding the tip structure. Yeah. Thank you.
So I think we can pick that up probably in the works programme item at the end. So it's just about opening hours of the recycling centre. Apart from that, there's no late items for myself and the chair to be introduced. Can I just ask, is there any declarations of interest from anybody on the agenda items for today? No? Thank you for that. Then the minutes of the last meeting, they're not available today. They will be in the future. Dominic, is there anything that we need to pick up as actions?
No, we'll just defer that until the next meeting.
Yeah. Okay, great. So then we move on to the first agenda item, which is an update on the grounds maintenance programme. So,
thanks, Chair.
Councillors, introduce yourself and then do the presentation.
Thank you. Councillors, thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Charles Edwards. I'm the interim head of service for our grounds and arboricultural team. The purpose of today is just to provide an update on some of the transformational stuff we've been doing in grounds. Our grounds team is made up of about 75 individuals. 32 of those look after our Derby Homes properties, the rest look after the city's grounds maintenance duties. That's anything from maintenance of grass verges right through to line marking of sports pitches and emptying bins on parks. So we have a huge remit across the whole city, obviously a lot of sites to look after and quite a finite resource. Dominic, my presentation is... Sorry. It's not as entertaining if it's just me talking, you see. It was up and then it's gone again. If not, I'll just have to continue and... Turn it on and off again. Okay.
I think you've all got copies, electronic copies of that, so maybe if you can follow it on the electronic copies.
Yeah, if you can, that'd be great. So what's been changing over the last 12 months for us in the team? So I've only been with Derby for about 10, well, just approaching 12 months. And there was two things that I picked up on initially that I saw some challenges, and one of those things was our leadership approach, and the other was the way that we work with partners. So when I talk about partners, what I mean there is interacting with members, the community, other services within the council. So it's our partnerships across the full breadth of partners. One of the first things that I picked up on after joining, probably within the first few months, was this idea of thrive over survive. And it's a leadership theory that I've been trying to develop with the grounds team. I spent a lot of time making notes about the things the team did, in particular our managers, the things they said and the way they acted. And when I looked at the notes, there was this common theme. And that was that most of our staff within the service was in what I call survival mode. So they didn't recruit in case the cuts came. They didn't spend the money that we have available for them in case the cuts came and they needed that underspend. Some of our staff were what I would call empire building. So, here we go. There we go. So we'll see how long this lasts. Some of our staff were what I would call empire building. So they were trying to get, a large team and do all of the duties for us, just in case, again, those cuts came. There was language like, if this goes wrong, where's it going to land? Blame culture, and I'm sure you'll have heard that said in councils. Things like, how does it fit in our maintenance regime? So there was no flexibility in the way that we did things. And that says to me, it's survival. It's how do we protect ourselves if the bad comes? Something else that I picked up on quite quickly that members probably weren't aware of was how we approached our new starters. So we would go through quite an elaborate recruitment campaign, and it could take us up to 6 months to get new people in. But then when they started, we wouldn't allow them to use certain pieces of equipment. It was what we called earning your stripes. So for things like ride-on mowers, obviously there is definitely some risk associated with that activity. It could take them up to 18 months to be allowed to use that piece of equipment. Now, I say often when I deliver this presentation, had I joined and my head of service said to me, we have you a laptop, but we don't trust you to use it yet, so here's a notepad, and once we trust you, you can have your laptop, I think I'd have ran pretty quickly out of the door. And what we were doing immediately with our staff was putting them in this survival mode of, we don't quite trust you yet. So, we're going to put all these rules in place. And the interesting thing about being in survival mode is that you can't dream when you're trying to survive. So a couple of things that we've been doing is changing the language and challenging the narrative quite literally. When I hear managers talk now around finance or recruitment, we stop them and we say, what are you trying to survive from? Mid-conversation, we'll call it out. We'll say, you sound like you're trying to survive. We're doing this thing that we call Champion the Future. And what we've done there to make sure staff are prepared is we've delivered a number of training courses. We've got 12% of our workforce now on workplace apprenticeships, which is really planning for the future. We don't create rules anymore, so when things go wrong, we look at how we can help that individual improve and not how we can stop them from doing it. So we have had a number of accidents recently with our ride-on machines, and what we've done there, instead of investigating them to stop it from happening again, in the sense of allowing them to use that equipment, it's how do we help them do it better in future. What we talk about to our staff now is this idea of protecting our staff, and not in a parental sense, like we'll help them tie their shoelaces and hold their hands, but when the bad comes, somebody will be there to manage that and look after them and support them. So it's really in its truest sense, a supportive type of leadership that we've now adopted. The other thing that I picked up on is this idea of council specialism. So you'll hear a lot in council officer speak. We say things like, I just want to do my day job, or that's not my job, that's HR's job or finance's job. And I hear it a lot in grounds, and I have a huge amount of sympathy for them because we don't really train them. The unique thing about being a council officer is that you have to do all of those activities. If you were to join the private sector as a gardener, you would just be a gardener, but in council it's not quite like that. So I have a huge amount of sympathy for our staff, but we're really trying to adopt this council specialism idea. So we no longer recruit gardeners, we recruit council workers, much like our arborists. They're not arborists anymore, they're council arborists. And it's firstly to instill this sense of pride that you work for the council, and what a great job that is, and lots of people would love that, and I love it, and I hope they will love it. But the other thing is to make them aware that their duties have an impact across a number of different services when we go out to do things. So in the first few months, I sat in on a number of recruitment campaigns, and our staff asked our future employees about 20 questions or so on technical things around marking out sports pitches. I would never have got the job. Like, I would have failed quite miserably. And we never asked them a question around what it meant to work for Derby City Council. And I was amazed. I was like, well, this individual might bring a huge amount of skill and opportunity to Derby City, but we've only focused on the technical aspect. So we've changed a few things. Recruitment, we now ask them, the first few questions are around working as a team. What is it about Derby City that attracted you to applying for the job? And what is it about working for a council that really interests you? We've redesigned job descriptions. So again, our job descriptions now in the service are not just around being a gardener, but they really encompass that idea of being a council worker. So what we ask for all of our roles now, in varying degrees of detail, but we ask for all of our roles to have an understanding of the council. So what I would hope is that when a gardener sees the job advertised, they do some research into Derby City Council and what it means to be a Derby City Council employee. So we've redesigned the recruitment process. And we've retrained staff, so we now have our frontline operatives, and these are the people cutting the grass, attend things like forecasting meetings. They sit in on recruitment panels. They attend HR meetings. And again, it's really to try and connect them with the bigger world of council, and not just that idea of being a gardener. What I would say is, and the retraining comes from the notion of giving council workers council skills. COVID by no means has had unprecedented consequences, and we've seen that over the last 18 months. But if we look at the skills, and if we look at it objectively, the skills it is demanded of us as council workers we have seen before. The idea of having to work at pace, put our community at heart, deliver services quickly, make good decisions. We see those skills required of us at times of crisis, whether it be from a flooding event, whether it be from another natural disaster. Now, not to compare flooding with the consequence of COVID, but we know there's something in there around the skills it requires, so what we should be doing is training our staff with those skills. And that's something that we've been doing in grounds. Another thing that we picked up on was this idea of outcome versus output. This is all about long-term investment, so it's not about the short term. What we do in council is we count because it's really easy to count. So we count the number of times we cut the grass because that's really easy to report on. We count the amount of times we empty bins because it's really easy to count. So whether a bin needs emptying 3 times or once, we empty them all 2 times and we report back on that figure. So what that does is it puts the output ahead of the outcome. We've changed that in grounds now, so what we're looking at, and we're not quite there yet with this idea, but we are getting there, we're looking at a bespoke way of delivering the services. So if I take bins, for example, we now empty bins the amount of times it needs emptying rather than this blanket average time. And that's because it gives us better service delivery. So it might mean that one bin gets emptied 5 times and one bin gets emptied every other week. But that's because it needs it rather than it's just easy to do it for us. We have to disconnect survive, so we have to move away from output stuff, otherwise people just go back into survival mode. If we always talk about the numbers and reporting on numbers, staff think that's the only thing they're measured against, and it's not. What we want is a really good service delivery for our residents. And the idea is to encompass this Team Derby approach that we're all aiming for. One of the things that I'll really quickly talk about is the performance matrix that we've been talking about in grounds. And this is a matrix that looks at all of those things put together. And what it does is it puts performance on the left-hand side and trust along the bottom. Performance is how we typically measure council staff, and we do it a lot in frontline services. So that's how good they are at being a grass cutter. Trust along the bottom is everything else. It's who you want to have your dinner with. It's who you might go to the smoking shelter with. It's everything else other than work. And we know that that has a huge impact on the way that we deliver our services as a team. What we've done traditionally is measure performance. So we have high-performing people in the team who actually are quite damaging in terms of workplace culture. And what we have to do is shift the narrative to the right-hand side of the matrix. So, of course, we want high-performing, high-trust people. They're ideal. They are our shining stars of the authority. But what we might do, and I say might, but we might actually sacrifice performance for high-trusting people. And that's because we know they're less damaging to the culture and therefore better for productivity than the people on the left-hand side. You'll know these people from your own personal life or from your own working environments. You'd rather work with the people that you get on quite well with. They're really good to have around, but actually sometimes they could do a little bit better. What we do with the people on the right-hand side in green is we coach them. So they've all now got coaches, and we try and improve their performance. So we're always aiming for that top right ideal. The people on the left-hand side, we mentor. So we have not given up on them, but what we need to do is show them the skills and attributes that we want and bring them across to the right-hand side of the matrix. The next thing is our partnerships. So this is how we work with other people, and it's something that I picked up on grounds not doing as much as I would have liked in those early days. So we've been looking at whole life cost. So this is the impact we have on other services when we go out and do things. Setting some really clear boundaries with people around why we do things, and giving staff and senior officers and others the operational knowledge of what grounds do and what they can do. So we've given staff technology to be able to communicate. So our frontline members of staff are now being able to email, they're being able to communicate with people. And what we are doing in some areas is allowing our frontline members of staff to communicate with members, which I think is a really positive step. Members have a huge amount of demand and want to know what's happening in their ward. And often they come to me or they'll go to a more senior member of staff, when in fact it's the people on the ground that know the answers to the questions. So in certain areas we've started connecting that to see what happens, and we're getting some really good responses from that. So I guess the important thing is, what does that mean for us, what's been happening? We've done all of those changes, and what have we delivered? And I'd hope that some of you have seen some of these things being delivered in and around Derby. So a couple of things we've been doing: robotic technology. We've now got a couple of robots throughout the city, which are just incredible. We've got one that cuts the grass and one that marks out all of our sports pitches for us. So it's now marking out sports pitches in under 10 minutes, which was taking us a lot longer before. So a site like Racecourse, where we've got 17 football pitches on it, the robot now just goes and does, and it's an incredible piece of kit. And what I would say is, if anybody's interested in seeing that technology, please, we're quite excited about showing people stuff like that. Digitalisation, so we're rolling out laptops, as I say, in-cab devices, and you may have seen these already being used in our refuse and street cleansing services, so grounds are now doing that. Our grass paintings, which go down a real treat, and hopefully you've seen, the NHS stuff we've done, the Stephen Lawrence grass painting here that we did. These get a really good warm welcome from residents and members, so really, really good piece of work that our team are doing. Wildflower meadows are on the increase, so we've done a number of these now and increasing more wildflower meadows. Living walls, big thing in terms of the climate change agenda, so we've delivered now and are delivering more living walls. Tree planting programme, and our employability scheme. So this is where we're employing people that have been directly affected by either things like COVID, and they come through our DAO service, which is, again, another really sort of good piece of work that we've done. The city centre and staff development are two that I really just quickly want to talk about. So staff development, something that's really important to me, and something that I really hope members can see adds a huge amount of benefit to the way that we do things. And that's how much my staff have developed over the last 12 months. What we've done is we've delivered a training schedule, so all of my members of staff have had a letter written to them by me that lists all of the training available to them, and they've been able to tick what they want, anything they want on there, and it ranges from reading and writing right through to the technical stuff, and that has been programmed over the next 3 years for them to go on. We've had workplace apprenticeships, we've had people visit other councils, self-learning, so these are gardeners as well. We've got gardeners listening to things like podcasts. They're all on LinkedIn talking about leadership theories. They're reading, they're sharing WhatsApps. We've got a library at the depot now where people are swapping leadership books, which is just incredible and probably not something we could have imagined before. And personal growth. So we're seeing really good examples of some of our staff grow in absolute confidence. And short term, we may not see the benefit of that, but long term, we absolutely will see the benefit of those individuals growing in confidence as officers. And then the last thing to talk about really is the city centre. And I'd love to show anybody around the city centre at some point in terms of the work that we're doing in there. All of the vibrancy stuff, the big council projects are really great, but unless we get some of the public realm stuff right, I don't think they'll matter too much. We've got to get those basics right, and we've certainly done that now. We've been working with allotment holders to provide the planting for the market event. We've got planters in there now that are growing strawberries and lettuces and beetroots. We've done wildflower meadows on the entrance and exits. We've done a huge amount of work. We're allowing people to do what we call guerrilla gardening, where they just take up pieces of public open space and plant what they want in there. We're working with a number of charities there to take food from floor to plate, so where we're allowing them to grow the food and then use that product. So I'd really encourage members to come and speak to us if you'd love to experience that. So I guess what happens next? Well, firstly, we're not perfect. We're definitely getting closer and closer each day, but we're not there. And I'm sure you've got many stories of where we've not done as well as we could, and you'd like us to see us do better. But this for me is about keep on doing and keep on improving, and we're definitely going in the right direction. Sharing our story, which is partly why I'm here, because I'm really proud of the progress we're making, and I'm definitely will be prouder when we've made more progress. We need to formalise the approach, so we will be looking over again the next 12 months around how we capture what we're doing in a more formal way so that we can share that with members and wider residents. And then I guess prepare for what happens next maybe, and make sure the team are ready for all of the challenges that we might experience in the future. That's a real whistle-stop tour of where grounds have gone and what they've been doing for the past 10 to 12 months. I will take questions, and I certainly take some positive feedback.
Thank you, Charles. That's a very upbeat presentation, and recruitment, development, and changing the face of the council seems all very positive. Any questions, comments, Councillor Atwell?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Charles. That was very positive. Just a couple of questions. What is the turnaround time for the training, depending on what different departments we're recruiting for?
So for the training?
Yeah.
In terms of staff going on training?
Yeah.
It completely depends on the course. We're aiming to get all of the staff who want apprenticeships on training this year, but that's an 18-month course. And because there's quite a lot of it, we're hoping to get it all completed in the next 3 years. But, you know, first aid, that's being done now, for example. So that will be done in a day. So.
Okay. And secondly, obviously getting back out of COVID and trying to get back to some sort of normality. What's the general morale like amongst the workforce?
I think, and I would invite members to come and speak to staff or come out with us for a day, and we can focus it around your wards. Because I think having done all of that with staff, morale's really high. And we have, although we're still doing all the cyclical stuff like the grass cutting, the bin emptying, all of that other stuff, that additional added value work we're doing, doesn't just add value to our residents, it adds a huge amount of value to our workforce, because they're not just grass cutters, but they can see the benefit, the social value that they're adding, and it's remarkable. So please, I'd invite you to come out and speak to us.
So just to give a little bit of feedback, because I've seen them out, I've met the crews when they've been doing these things like grass painting. You can see the pride amongst the teams when they're doing it. And I think it's a fantastic offer to the residents as well.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, yeah, I've seen the work at the city centre. All the planters are looking lovely. So definitely a welcoming change at the town centre. About the bins, you said the bins, emptying of bins has been a concern lately. A lot of bins have been getting overflowed. And I've been using the reported service on the council website. But are you working on it to stop the bins maybe from overflowing? Thank you.
Councillor Pandy, just to add to that, following, in addition to what Councillor Pandy has said, you mentioned bins. Some of them are overflowing. Size is an issue. I noticed that in certain parks, like the Mark Eaton Park, we've got the large bins. And a park like Normanton Park hasn't got the large bins. Is that something that you looked at? Is that something that Councillor Pandy's question about the really small bins which get overflown and how to maintain them? And then that second question, so around bins.
Yeah, so bins, the short answer is yes, we are looking at it. So we've seen an increase, clearly we've seen an increase in footfall on parks because of COVID, which actually I think is a fantastic thing because more people have stayed local. And what we should be trying to do is keep them there because how great is it that more people are visiting Derby parks? In terms of parks, bins on parks, we are reviewing that across the whole of the city. We know, and that's where we go back to making sure that the delivery is bespoke to what's necessary. They need to be emptied at the rate in which they need emptying, and the size is definitely an issue. So we need to look at capacity. There are some complications with it. You know, a large bin on a far side of a field where we can't get a vehicle, clearly we can't empty that. So we need to be smarter. We've recruited a service performance or service improvement officer who is looking at that and will make formal recommendations. Our street cleansing crews, they've put bin sensors in all of theirs and they're seeing really great results from bin sensors. The technology is telling them when their bins are full. So in terms of the bins on the parks, that's something in the long term we will be looking at.
What I have noticed is that the majority of the litter, it comes from fast food joints. So I was thinking about this maybe, you know, as a council, if we can approach these fast food joints and ask them maybe if we can look into some sort of campaign, and that can help the council also in a big way.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Councillor, thank you. Keep Britain Tidy, who are a national charity that campaign for these things, do bring in some of the big fast food outlets. What I would say in defence of them is they are very conscious about the impact they have on the environment, and normally, I say normally, they're willing to work with local authorities to try and improve that. So sometimes it does just simply start with a conversation. I think what we need to do is make sure we've got everything in order before we do that: capacity, frequency, the right equipment, the right technology. And when we're in a position to do that, we then go to them and say, let's now work in partnership to deal with it.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments for Charles?
Sorry, another one. Barbecues are illegal, what I understand, at the parks. And recently we have seen lots of barbecues going on, especially when the park staff they've gone home. And that's been a concern. So are you looking into it? Thank you.
I'm not aware of that issue, but if there are specific issues on specific sites, what I would say is, you know, come to us and talk to us. So there's a number of teams that we can sort of coordinate that with. So between ourselves, our parks and our public protection team, if that's something that you're having a specific issue with, please get in touch and we'll certainly look at it.
Just one more from me, Charles. You mentioned apprentices. You said 12% of the workforce in the grounds maintenance, I think you're suggesting is on apprenticeship. Are they new apprentices or are they existing, because there are two types of apprentices, and the people, existing ones who are going on apprenticeships to improve their development and the training, and what's the split between new apprentices with new people getting a chance to get a job?
Yeah, great question.
Or those who are already established staff and they getting.
So that 12% is my current workforce going on workplace apprenticeships. So they're ranging from horticulture, leadership, those types of things, where they are enhancing their skills. What we are looking at developing is a programme right from traineeships, so 15 and 16-year-olds coming out of school potentially early, getting employment with us, and then working from traineeship right from apprenticeship into workplace employment. We've done that in ARB, so we've created a new role within ARB that brings in a non-skilled individual, gives them the skills in arboriculture, and then a job at the end of it. And that's because we know as an industry, we're lacking in those skills. We're lacking in trained gardeners, trained arborists. So we are going right back to the start. And a lot of my staff, and for members that know my staff, are right at the other end of their career who are potentially going to retire soon. And there is some corporate risk associated with that. So we're going right back to 15 and 16-year-olds and training them to make sure they're ready for the future.
outcomes you're looking for and what's the timescale?
Yeah, so we've got 1 out of staff of 9 in ARB. And what we are looking at is up to 4 roles within our grounds team for next year, starting as either a traineeship or as apprenticeship. And that is specifically employed as an apprenticeship. But we do have some work to do with our apprenticeship team before we can do that.
Any other questions or comments? So on the back of that, I think in terms of recommendations, we've considered the presentation, so thank you very much for that. And any further comments? I think there's a number of things we've heard about bins. So I think we need an update on how you're progressing with the size of the bins and then some of the planning with other food outlets. And I think I would also like to see some feedback on how you progress with the apprenticeship, the enhancing of apprenticeship or new apprenticeships to be brought back in the future meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can do
Okay,
that.
are we okay with those recommendations? Sure, it's in there, brought back. Great, thank you, Samantha. Well done. Moving on to the next agenda then is financing of the public protection officers team.
Mic on, apologies. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sam Dennis. Now you can hear me. I'm the Director of Public Protection and Street Pride. Just to round off Charles's presentation, I'm really proud that this work's been going on in my directorate, and I think it's great that we've been able to change the culture. And as such, which leads into this report, Charles has just been appointed as the new Head of Community Safety and Integration. So hopefully what we will see are some changes in terms of culture and behaviours going forward within community safety and integration. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm here presenting that report, that we've had some conversation about this team over the years. So I'd invite Charles to stay with me and participate if needs be. So I was asked to bring a report to Scrutiny on funding the Public Protection Officer team, and actually in a pre-meet with the Chair we just broadened the scope slightly, so I will touch on some areas of where work touches the Public Protection Officer team, particularly around fly tipping and waste, but there won't be a great deal of detail in some of that. But what I'll do is just work through it, and I can take questions at the end, or we can add things to the work plan going forward if we need to, so I can prepare more data. So what I'm asking members to do is note the contents of the report and then raise any points necessary. As members will probably be aware, I recently joined Derby City. So in order for me to get the background, I've revisited previous scrutiny meetings and just read through the notes and some of the actions. So I can see there's been a number of reports brought to scrutiny about the Public Protection Officer team. So I'm hoping I've captured some of the areas that I can see there were some outstanding questions within the main content of my report. So from what I found was a new model of neighbourhood working was approved at Cabinet on the 13th of March 2019, which developed this approach, and it increased the number of public protection officers from 9 to 20 to give ward-based coverage across the city. The PPO team at the time was designed to deal with antisocial behaviour, nuisance parking and environmental crime. Previous reports have identified some cultural challenges in the service, some difficulties with recruitment, and a refocus away from parking issues again. So we designed them to deal with parking and then took them away from parking issues. Previous reports have highlighted the need for better integration with wider council services, including Derby Homes. So in terms of the approach used, public protection officers use the 3 E's approach to engage, educate and enforce. So I hope that gives members some confidence that actually we don't go straight in and enforce when actually people need some support and advice. And members did previously request an overview of enforcement powers, which I've included in the body of this report. The 3 E's approach is supported and considered good practice by Keep Britain Tidy, who deliver the Enforcement Academy training for local authorities. So it's quite a unified approach that we use there. As you'll all be well aware of, in March last year, the COVID-19 pandemic significantly impacted the council's ability to deliver services and refocus resources onto trying to reduce the spread and manage the impact of COVID-19. The PPO team, therefore, refocused their priorities and took a lead role in localised contact tracing. So that means they took their attention away from enforcement and actually focused on the COVID effort. That said, there was some enforcement continued where it needed to, but actually COVID has been and continues to be a priority for us. What COVID did was highlight some good practice. So it highlighted, it enhanced collaboration between teams. It also highlighted good practice in terms of our approach to dealing with things. And that's led to a joint tasking arrangement that we attend 3 times a week with the police, other officers including environmental health, trading standards, etc. So what that means is in that joint tasking, based on what's happening in terms of the COVID issue, what's happening in terms of the stage we're at in the roadmap, there'll be different things we need to do. And in that joint tasking, we can identify what are the demands, who's got the skills to do it, and we can allocate the work accordingly. PPOs have very much been in the forefront of that work. The team have continued to support the wider community safety agenda, though, throughout the COVID pandemic, and I will come on to some performance data which members will have in your packs that just shows how we've kept the service going whilst focusing on COVID. Shift patterns within the service have recently changed, so members will note that in previous reports the service was designed to operate up to 10 o'clock at night and over evenings and weekends. And actually, that didn't happen through the start of COVID. As we were focusing our resource in different places, we didn't operate outside of normal business hours. So some recent changes have seen that, implemented in the service. This means we've got coverage now up until 10 o'clock on parks and open space and through the city centre, particularly on weekends where there's the risk of antisocial behaviour, etc. on our parks. So during the pandemic, officers have been required to adapt their role to support residents to reduce the risk of spreading the virus. They have continued to provide key frontline services. They've completed nearly 1,500 COVID-related absences, which include safe and well checks, etc. But they've also, that's included in their wider over 8,000 service requests that they've completed throughout the performance year. So actually it might have been useful to put these in a slide, but in the agenda pack you'll see some graphs which actually demonstrate the work that the team have done in terms of that compliance. So looking at April to March last year, so April 20 to March 21, we can see that there was over 1,000 COVID compliance checks carried out. It's 152 safe and well checks, and they assisted residents with 219 issues related to COVID. And there were 65 times PPOs have been the only person available to drop off somebody's medication for them. So you can see they're actually focusing on vulnerability there. So in terms of the wider kind of team support through COVID, other teams such as trading standards, environmental health have had to refocus their resources as well. So the PPO team has stepped up and they've dealt with 16 noise complaints, 37 bonfire complaints, 42 abandoned vehicles and a few other bits and pieces as well, just to enable other officers to actually focus on the COVID effort. So in terms of the Council's ability to deliver services through COVID, you'll see that we've had to prioritise, but the PPO team have been really key in doing that. To just take members through some ward-based activity data, in the agenda pack you'll see that the demands broken down by ward-based, with the highest level of demand carried out in wards like Alveston, Arboretum, Normington, Sinfin, the lowest level of demands in Oakwood. And I think that's based really on vulnerability of the residents in those areas. So what we've done is we've been able to focus our resources where we needed them. So just in terms of their overall demands dealt with, the PPO team have continued to reactively deal with issues that have been raised with them and called in. So they completed 8,469 service requests, with 112 of them resulting in enforcement action by way of either a fixed penalty notice or a parking charge notice. That equates to just over 19% of serviced requests. This demonstrates that 80% of the time officers are providing that advice, support and guidance. So we're not going in and enforcing first without actually asking questions. That said, the graphs that I've attached to the report will show that there was 1,394 fly tipping investigations carried out. So then they're not resting on their laurels, so they're still picking up issues where they need to. And over 900 antisocial behaviour issues as well. So the report goes on to give a little bit more breakdown. In terms of public stakeholder engagement, updates have been presented previously to the Community Scrutiny Review Board in January 2020, August and September of the same year. So I'm hoping I've captured some of the information requested in those previous meetings. So the report requirement was around the budget, so I've put a table in just to go through the budget. So it was noted in previous reports that there was no capacity to complete the full administrative process when an FPN's been issued, and that will have absolutely impacted on our ability to bring in some funding. I can confirm that we have provided some capacity through the Public Protection Business Support Hub, but there is a vacant post that's being advertised for. So that is something that I'm hoping to be able to bridge that gap when we can get an officer in whose role will be to ensure they follow up when an FPN's been issued. Although that said, further consideration does need to be given to the customer access and administrative functions within the service. So my understanding of the service at the moment is that to access the PPO service, you go through the manager. That's not the best use of the manager's time. Actually, they need to be providing leadership and challenge. So one of the things I'll be asking Charles to look at when he takes up post is reviewing those administrative processes and making sure we've got resource where it's needed. So the net cost of the PPO service in the budget is 333k. And in terms of the breakdown, for the 21-22 budget, that's 720k overall salary cost and 40k service cost. So the service cost is all the things they need to do to operate the service. So the total cost is 760k, which is offset by a contribution from the HRA by Derby Homes of 265k. And there is a 162k income target. That leads to the 333k net budget in the Public Protection Service. So you'll appreciate it would be key to get that role in place whose job is going to be to ensure we do recover income when we've issued those fixed penalty notices or parking charge notices. Members did request information to understand the cost of dealing with fly tipping as well, so I've covered that in this report. And also the impact this has had on the PPO team. So in terms of waste collection and disposal, the council does have a statutory duty to collect waste and dispose of waste, and also to complete statutory returns to the Environment Agency. That's called waste data flow, and then an element of that is called fly capture. Now what fly capture does is give an indicative cost to managing that waste. So as a council, we enter into the system every quarter how much waste we pick up, the types of waste, etc. And the Environment Agency will attribute a cost based on the average cost of staff, resource, disposal, etc. to that waste. So when I talk about costs of fly tipping in this report, it's fly tipping as calculated or valued by the Environment Agency. So that just gives an overall kind of understanding of where that comes from. So from April 2020 to March 21, the council collected over 7,000 fly tips, with cost attributed by the Environment Agency of being 334.9k, so 335k, and that's indicative by waste data flow. So just to briefly bring members on to the HWRC. To enable social distancing at Rainsway, opening times were reduced and bays were reduced to 1 resident per bay. And a booking system was implemented, which received positive feedback from residents and businesses. That generated a saving of 575k, and actually that saving was then made permanent as part of the council's MTFP. And that enabled that supported a balancing of the COVID's finances during a time of significantly increasing demands across the pandemic. And in terms of wider context, there is still an £11 million budget gap for the council overall. So in terms of the legislation requested by members, so legal impacts, so PPOs or public protection officers do provide a visible enforcement presence in the city, and they do have the powers to enforce against antisocial behaviour, environmental crime and breaches of public spaces protection orders. The legislation that we use and devolve to the PPOs is from the Environmental Protection Act 1990, the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2014, the Public Spaces Protection Orders, and more recently, the Health Protection Coronavirus Regulations 2020. From a climate perspective, public protection officers do support the climate agenda with the enforcement against waste crime offences. Waste and recycling are key factors in the council's ability to support the climate change agenda. So in terms of other significant implications then, the public protection officers play a key role in providing a visible uniform presence in the city. We work with partners and businesses, and in particular the bid rangers in the city, to provide a visible deterrent for crime and disorder. Derby's parks and open spaces have provided an area for people to use, and Charles has given a really great example of how that use has gone on. And actually, providing a patrolling presence to these areas does give residents more confidence that they're being managed, and it helps to maintain feelings of safety in the city. The council is developing an approach called Better Together, which identifies a better way of locality working. Now, the public protection officers are not in the scope of that project in what we call an experimental phase. But what's happening is our local area coordinators, our housing officers and our neighbourhoods officers are all currently looking at data and information to understand how they can work better with residents rather than doing two. Public protection officers are key to that, and they do provide important information and knowledge, but they are outside of the review that's currently taking place. So in terms of bulky waste service, so the council does operate a chargeable curbside bulky waste collection service, and there are 2 crews that operate 4 days a week. Throughout COVID, this was capacity was increased just to take up demand. So the total number of bulky waste service requests from April to March 21 was 7,513, and that generated 171k income for the council. In terms of latest fly tipping data from the Environment Agency's waste data flow, it does show a national trend, a national increase in fly tipping. There's been a significant impact in the East Midlands, and Derby is no exception to this. Waste data flow attributes the cost, which I've noted to members, and the cost of the weighted measure in managing fly tipping in the city is valued at 334.9k for last year. And if I just talk to members about some of that data, what we're actually seeing from that trend data is that Derby City, whilst incidents have increased as they have nationally and indeed regionally, Derby City hasn't seen an increase as big as the county have. So actually we've seen less of an impact in the city than the wider county. Fly tipping is dealt with by 3 street pride crews in the city, and the assumed cost of those crews are included in the Environment Agency calculation and the waste data flow figures. In addition to this, our colleagues in Derby Homes Estate Response Team manage fly tipping in social housing areas as part of their duties. They also work collaboratively with the PPOs, Street Pride, neighbourhoods teams and housing officers to help residents dispose of their waste and resolve problems. Charles mentioned earlier the digital technology that's been implemented in waste and is being rolled out in grounds. And actually this digital technology is proving to be really valuable for street pride waste, and we're looking to actually bring the PPO team onto that system as well. So we can plot the waste issues. They can actually then readjust their patrol plans based on what the maps are telling us that the hotspots are showing. And in terms of things like behavioural insights, one of the things we want to do in the service is understand why people behave the way they do in terms of waste. Keep Britain Tidy have done several experiments using behavioural insight techniques. One of their experiments was around fly tipping, and actually what they found is that people who fly tip tend to do it in a place that's familiar to them. And the council then wants to collect that fly tipping as quickly as possible so residents don't see it and aren't impacted by it. And actually what that does is legitimise that as a way of disposing of your waste. So if you know you can put the fly tipping down and somebody's going to come and pick it up the next day, you're more inclined to do it. So studies shown that leaving the fly tip in place, using tools like crime tape and A-boards to actually highlight that the council knows about it, leaving it there for 5 days did actually provide results that 70% of those fly tips were actually taken back by the person who's put them there at the end of the trial period. So what I'm asking Street Pride to do is now engage with Keep Britain Tidy and just look at what experiments can we do in Derby to get a better understanding of how we can help people dispose of their waste and prevent fly tipping. So just in terms of a summary then, the Council's public protection team were developed to deal with antisocial behaviour and environmental crime, initially parking as well, but they then pulled back from parking. The net cost of the service is 333k. Street Pride services manage waste collection and disposal, along with street cleansing and other maintenance operation. So crews provide bulky waste collection and fly tipping clearance. Where evidence is present in fly tipping, a referral is made for an investigation. The PPOs then undertake that investigation. The cost of waste collection crew and vehicles around 150k, and any income generated from a bulky waste collection would offset that cost. Bulky collection, offsets the cost. The full cost estimated by the Environment Agency for the cost of dealing with fly tipping in Derby is around 335k, based on 5,728 fly tips in the last performance year. In terms of Rainsway, the council provides disposal facilities at Rainsway, Household Waste Recycling Centre. In the height of the pandemic, we really did reduce back the ability to use Rainsway to ensure there was social distancing on site. We've had lots of positive feedback from people around using the single bay per person, also positive feedback from businesses around it. This approach did save 575k in the cost of waste disposal, and that cost was then included in the council's mid-term financial plan and actually taken as a budget saving at the end of last year. So just in terms of bulky waste collection, to support that offsetting of the HWRC, we increased the bulky waste collection at the curbside to provide that service for residents. So innovative solutions are being explored nationally to address fly tipping, and the council is currently exploring methods of including those behavioural insights in what we do, so we can get a better understanding of our residents' needs and we can adjust services accordingly. So I'll pause there and invite any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Samantha, for that. Questions? Councillor Sandhu, Councillor Pandey and Councillor Atwal in that order. Tim? Yeah. Councillor Sandhu.
Thank you, Chair. Some questions, clarification. On a figure 4, PPO demands 2020-21. It says 112 resulting in enforcement action, fixed penalty notice. Have you got figures what these are for? Are they fly tipping or?
Yeah, usually. So just looking at the data that I was given, most of the fixed penalty notice, the highest number was for fly tipping. There were some for dog fouling and some for parking issues, but the vast majority were fly tipping.
Any particular ward? Is it Normanton or Breetham or?
So again, just coming back to the data, in terms of total PPO activity by ward, enforcement activity, the highest area was Normington, with the second being Arboretum and the third being Sinfin.
Normanton Ward and then Arboretum Ward second.
Wards, yes. Yeah.
So 112 is something not, as by my understanding was, we were in Normanton, only just on Normanton, I think we had a 94 fixed penalty, 94 fixed penalty. So out of 112, it's a 94 in Normanton, so 100, total is only 112.
So in terms of the data, so what I've asked for them to do is just break down COVID data and non-COVID data in Normanton. So there are two graphs there with Normanton on. So the one I'm talking about now is just enforcement action. So there will be a breakdown of everything that's happened in Normanton, but just in terms of enforcement action, it was just over 35 fixed penalty notices. I'm here in the red graph. So I am on Fig 6 on page 5, so in section 4. You can see the red graph actually shows just enforcement, not everything they've done.
Okay. Thank you.
That's clearly showing Normanton Ward. Normanton Ward, I think, is the highest.
Highest one.
Arboretum
It
second.
doesn't say figures
And
there,
Sinfin.
that's why I asked.
Yeah. Any, okay, thank you.
I got a few questions. So, you mentioned the bulky waste collection revenue. So is that subsidized or it's just to cost? So what you make is basically that's the cost of disposing of the waste.
Yeah, no, it is subsidised. So what we make doesn't cover the entire cost. It contributes to it, but it's part of our core service. So the cost of a crew is around 150k. So the income, we've got 2 crews providing bulky waste. So the income we get pays for just over 1 crew. We fund the rest from the service.
Okay, because I was thinking if the prices can be brought down, would that help in reducing the fly tipping? So that was one of my maybe thoughts. The second question, you mentioned that there's a nationwide trend with the increase in fly tipping as we see. But are you is there a data collaboration with the other councils or maybe ranking sort of thing in which maybe a certain council is taking a lead on this particular subject? Because I believe waste is a council subject, isn't it?
Yeah, waste is a council subject. So there's a lot of work happening at the moment in waste. The government is consulting on lots of areas with their waste and resources strategy. And things have been delayed due to COVID. So we are working on our waste strategy, but until the government's released the results of the consultation, we don't know what the government's going to ask us to do. So there's some things we can do now, but there's some things we have to wait. And in terms of trying to be proactive, we met with our colleagues at Nottingham City last week to talk about how we can work together to actually have a joint strategy so we can help each other with that.
So coming back to is there a council in the whole country which has maybe managed to set up an example and done really well with the reduction in fly tipping?
Yeah, so Leicester City Council have done really well, and actually met them at an event where they were talking about some of the things they did, and they use things like crime tape, etc. There's some other councils. I'm looking at Charles to help me out now. Who's got the scrap? Hertfordshire. That's right. It was Hertfordshire. So they have a kind of approach just in terms of a media campaign around dealing with fly tipping in Hertfordshire, and councils are invited to join that approach and buy into those tools.
Because I think we do need that in Derby. In all honesty, in the recent times, whenever I reported a fly tipping, it got dealt very quickly and it was removed. But what we have seen that there are hotspots, like you said, and if something can be done to the hotspots, like you said, maybe a tape or maybe surveillance posters, like I've seen few in Normanton where someone is watching you, those kind of posters,
Yeah.
if we can, get them around at the hotspots, because there are quite a few hotspots across the city. And then the behavior which is concerning is the people throwing out the litter through their car windows. That's becoming another pandemic. So I know it's like, you will say it's not council matter, it's a highways matter. But it's like when you leave the city, the boundaries
Yeah,
is just there. So yeah, there's a lot of good work being done. But more can be done. Then we can have a...
You're absolutely right, Councillor. So just in terms of littering from vehicles and waste issues and fly tipping, littering in general, I am asking the teams to look at creative solutions around that. So one of the things that we are looking at is where technology can help us. So littering from vehicles, for example, Charles and I actually, we worked together previously in another authority, and we went to Westminster to talk about the new legislation, actually how we can enact that new legislation and actually deal with the issues of litter from vehicles. Because if we think about our wider regeneration aspirations, we want people to come into Derby and see it in its best self. We don't want people to come in and see litter on the trunk roads and on the main arterial routes in. So there has been some changes in legislation, which means we can enforce against people with just their number plate. So previously we would have to have a description of the driver, and we'd have to have some degree of confidence that we've seen that driver, and then we can start the enforcement process. The change in legislation that Charles and I were involved with actually means that now we can enforce the registered keeper of the vehicle that the litter's coming out of. So it doesn't matter if it was a driver or a passenger, the driver is responsible, which is really positive. So taking that to another level, what we're looking at in Street Pride is where artificial intelligence can help us with that. So on our main routes where it's actually too dangerous to have anybody out there looking at these things, some of our cameras could potentially be used for that. And we're in the very early stages of finding out what the possibilities are. But we have cameras around the city for lots of different reasons, for speed, for parking permits, etc. So we're looking at whether we can use them for littering too.
So last one. Yeah, finally, I would say if council can work with these schools, because schools, especially secondary schools, are a major contributor to the litter. So if we can work with the schools, educate the youth, then we can see a significant difference.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And one of the themes in our waste strategy will absolutely be education.
Thank you.
It'd be helpful to see if you've got a planned strategy to bring that back here, because the awareness raising and the education at schools is really going to be important.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Councillor Atwell.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the update, Samantha. That was very positive to hear that. Can you just tell us how many at present do we have of public protection officers at this moment in time working for us in Derby?
At this moment in time, so we are actually recruiting. So I believe we have 16. We don't have full resource at the moment, but we've recently recruited 5. So some of the recruitment challenges we've had, we seem to have overcome because we've got some really good talent in the team, and we're out to recruit again.
Okay, just one more, Chair. How long does the recruitment process take? And obviously, again, going back to training, how long does it take before actually they're ready to go out and do the job they're supposed to be doing?
It's actually not that long. So the new officers that I met about 6 weeks ago are out on the beat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Thank you, Chair.
Just to, Samantha, just to clarify, it's a question I was asking. We've got 5 new recruits for PPOs, but how far are we from the 20?
We are 4.
Because 20 is the establishment.
I think we are 4 away from the 20.
4 short of...
Yeah, so 1 is a senior and 3 are PPOs. So actual PPOs, 3, and then 1 leadership position PPO,
Right.
so 4 total.
Yeah, 4 out of I think the 20 is the right number, so congratulate you on sort of working towards that, but we're about 4 short.
4 short, yeah.
4 short.
But what we do have, so because we've got 16, our shift patterns, we've got enough that we've got cover on all 4 shift patterns. So we've got 4 teams of 4 at the moment, which provide that coverage over the weekends and evenings as well. So whilst we've got the advert out and we're still recruiting, we are still able to provide a full service because we have enough to cover those shifts.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say from my experience in Normanton Ward, the coming back into the work in terms of the pattern you've described, but there has been they've been stretching themselves, haven't they? The ones who have been in post with the shortage. So, and we've seen that. We feel that in terms of the pressure on those PPOs.
Yeah. But I think the recruitment that we've carried out has been really successful. And I think we've now got a really good method of getting them in and training them up. The Keep Britain Tidy 5-day enforcement academy is key as well to get people hitting the road running as quickly as possible.
So you're 4 short. Have you got a plan how quickly that can be met? And is there anything we can do as a scrutiny board to help you?
Well, the adverts are out at the moment, so it will be a case of how long the successful candidates have to give notice, really. So I don't think we need any help, but I thank you for the offer. I think...
We're here to help.
Sorry?
We're here to help.
I recognise that, Chair.
Yeah. Okay.
But it is all in progress.
Yeah. Okay. Just 1 second.
Chair, Chair, hold on. I got to leave the meeting now. I got to pick my dad from hospital.
Okay, there's no other questions, so yes, you can ask another one.
I got to go. I got to leave the meeting. I got to pick my dad from hospital. I left him there with me. So, yeah.
And the vacancy. So we're interested in supporting you in terms of reaching that, because it will help us all in all our different wards, because the PPOs are very important. So Dominic, if you can make a note of that, and we can sort of get an update from in terms of meeting those vacancies. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Yeah. I've got a couple.
Okay.
So one Councillor Atwood asked, which is about the new recruits and how far we are in terms of reaching our establishment. You mentioned about income generation, which is the sort of and the section you've got here, which is talking about 720,000 is the salary cost and the total income is 428. Is that your target?
The financial section, Chair.
That's on page 6.
Yep.
7.3. I just wanted, in terms of the variance, I think on there, in terms of achieving, where are you in terms of the budget that you've been set, and
Are we projected to hit our targets this year? Is that the question?
Yeah.
So in terms of
because the income generation is
Yeah.
is what you're required to have in income and what you actually
Yeah.
the actuals are not.
So we are, our end of year income target is 162k from FPN's enforcement activity. The income from Derby Homes is 265k. So that income is a given that's moved across. So the challenge is how we hit our 162k target through fixed penalty notices. To date, so the data I put in the report was April and May, and we'd achieved 2k at that point, which will look low compared to the target. And I think where we recognise there is an issue is that there is a vacancy in actually managing the administrative process of that. So I don't think that gives an appropriate reflection or projection of where we would hit year end. So the 2k is effectively for FPNs that have been paid straight away without any chasing. Where we are in the service is that we do have a vacant post for someone in a business support function to actually recover that money. So I've done some work with the PPO team leader, and she's been looking at what the crews would have to do in terms of hitting their targets. And actually it led to quite a challenging conversation both ways. So the team leaders working out each officer would need to generate X amount of revenue each. But actually the challenge is, we engage and we advise people first, we explain, we help them before we enforce. So what I don't want is to drive behaviours where people are almost waiting outside a shop for someone to flick a cigarette in to issue a litter FPN. So what we need to do is absolutely use all the data and technology we can to capture evidence of fly tipping. And if we talk to frontline street pride crews who actually see the evidence, and they can now capture that evidence on their tablets. We've got more scope there to actually initiate some of the enforcement. So I think that figure, whilst I recognise it looks low, and if we were going to project forward based on that figure, we absolutely wouldn't hit that target. I think with the steps in place in terms of the business support hub and the technology, I think we're more likely to hit it. But I think we need to be realistic in the current COVID climate, and actually, as we start progressing through the year, if the funding officer doesn't think we are going to hit that target, then I need to have a conversation with the 151 officer straight away to note that pressure. But actually where we are at the moment is they are committed, where there is evidence of fly tipping, that they would take that action. My focus is that I would like them to be focusing on people who are deliberately committing a criminal act, so people who are charging to collect waste and then fly tipping that waste. That is more important to me than actually enforcing against someone who is struggling and has done the wrong thing. And I think, you know, I need to be ever so clear about that, because if we don't hit the target because we have helped people who are really struggling, then we need a different conversation.
I don't know what the board thinks, but I think the idea of changing behaviour is really important. Enforcement and fines is all well and good, and it may be unrealistic in terms of using that as a income generator, but the actual behavioural change is what we need to work on. So I would suggest that we would support that behavioural change, and I think that's the bit we need to spend more time. So I'm very positive, very welcoming of your idea of identifying vulnerability against people who are just doing it because they can't be bothered, and have that two-pronged approach. So I'd like to sort of, with the support of the board, to support that approach that you've shared with us, Samantha, that, you know, we do need to find out behaviour change and actually distinguish between people who are flagrantly abusing their rights and responsibilities against those who are vulnerable, and be happy to receive a report back in the future in terms of what your plans are about vulnerability and tackling that and changing behaviour and putting the right steps in place on that.
Great, thank you, Chair.
If there's no other questions, so the other one I was going to ask was that you mentioned the 575,000 savings, and it's probably linked to the question Councillor Atwood and I were talking about before, but I think it fits into this. You mentioned that has been partly due to the hours of opening and then the way the booking system is.
That's correct.
So that's generated that.
Yeah.
It seems to me that is more accessibility and more ability for people to recycle waste is needed. What can you say whether you think that's sustainable or you think that needs changing?
I think that there's a challenge, Chair. So as an organisation, we've got an £11 million funding gap, and that's very real. So if we decide to fund something, so for instance, if we fund the Household Waste Recycling Centre and we say let's open it back up again and effectively, you know, reinstate that 575k, we're going to have to take it from somewhere else. So there are pressures. So whatever we do needs to be a balanced decision. We are looking at data. We are looking at pre-COVID use. And actually what I'm talking to you as Shadow Cabinet Member about, and I'm talking to my Cabinet Member about, is what happened pre-COVID. When did people use the site? So if we were to look at any different options for the site, what is the best piece of data to model that on? My view, it would be model it on use and demand, because we could open up the site. You know, it's open currently, I think, 10 hours a day on a weekend and 6 hours in the week. Actually, you know, the worst thing we can do is open the site up if nobody wants to use it, because that's a waste of resource. So we need to get that understanding first. And I think recognising that we took a decision because of the situation and the state of the finances, then I think we need to be really clear on what we're going to stop doing if we were going to open up the HWRC further than it is at the moment. But what we will absolutely do is model what that would look like so members can make an informed decision, because the decision we have at the moment is to maintain the current level of opening hours as per the budget report in February.
Okay. I mean, my view is it's public that we do need to open it more hours. I mean, I don't know what the view of the board members are. Sorry?
We need a second site. We need somewhere the other side of the city that serves serving out a much better service.
I think it's got to be data driven, and it's quite clear with the booking system. You can easily see what the demand is, and if there's vacant slots, there's no demand. If there's more inquiries to book a slot where there's no slots available, then we'll need to change it.
Yeah.
Simple.
Thanks. Can I bring Councillor Atwood in and then Councillor Prosser after that?
Thank you, Chair. Samantha, just to give you a bit of background, I run a logistics and a van hire company in Derby. And a lot of my local vans are used for house moves, hence house moves create rubbish. And a lot of people haven't got access to internet. And I think from a personal perspective, it is a contributing factor to a lot of the fly tipping that does go on, not just in my ward, in every ward of the city, because if people can't get there, they just can't be bothered. Again, and it goes back to the very positive point you made about education. I mean, you can't educate somebody who just isn't interested. On top of that, you've got the rogue guys in the pickup trucks who will charge you £30 to move a house full of stuff, and they'll just dump it somewhere for the sake of the fact that they'll do 2 or 3 runs a day. It's a quick 90 quid and their job is done. But again, a lot of the residents don't realise that when it does get found out, it'll come back to the registered keeper where the rubbish is dumped. So I think the slot situation at the tip, I think it needs to, we're getting back to a bit of normality now. I mean, today's what's the name from the government when they said that a lot of football grounds will be back to capacity. If you can let 50,000 people into Wembley Stadium, surely you can get people coming into the tip again and fly tip. You know, we could keep using this excuse of COVID. Okay, we're making a saving, but in the long run, it's going to cost us more to get that rubbish to the tip. So that's something we need to look at. Okay, I hear where you come from, Councillor Prosser, that we're doing this second site. To start off with, let's get the first site we've got open as what it used to be, because people want to use it, but they can't get access to using it. You know, people have got to work around the fact that a lot of people are back to work. They've got to adjust their movements to get to the tip. Before, okay, people on furlough, they had all the time in the world, they could do that. You've got to take into fact there's a lot of vulnerability where people haven't got access to the internet, so therefore they can't book a slot. So therefore, you know, my recommendation, if you take it back to Cabinet, is let's get the slots out the way. Let's get this tip up and running, and let's get people, the council taxpayer, the full use of getting their stuff recycled back at Rainsbury tip. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Prosser.
So the slot system suits quite a lot of people, and it suits them because there are no queues. The queues are reduced. But it only suits the people who are really organised and are able to go to the tip at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. They know that they can spend 5 minutes loading a few things in their car. They can run down the tip and not queue. And for them, that's fantastic. For a lot of other people, they don't know how long it's going to take to cut the hedge, empty the shed, do whatever they need to do that day. And they find it really difficult to book. As a result, they don't. And there is a lot of waste then fly tipped. And it becomes really difficult for people to use the tip. Now, the reason people give it real positive reviews is the lack of queues. And of course, the problem with the queues was because the tip was never big enough for the city as it was. So I agree, we need to get the tip back open and function on a level which suits the city. But that tip has never been appropriate for the city for many, many years. So the way to solve this problem of the large queues, which has been known for a very long time, is a second tip. Now, I do agree that it just needs work, and it needs work to balance it. But where we are at the moment, we are encouraging fly tipping. It is building up still in people's gardens. It is building up in neighbourhoods. Every day, we are reporting more and more fly tipping, and it's taking a vast amount of time from the whole council. And the biggest cause of this has to be the lack of access to the tip.
Councillor Jennings, you made the point about are we is the demand not being met? And I think it's a question which the officers could answer, but I think my personal view is that the experience of people, particularly vulnerable, difficult people who find it difficult to use the services as they are, we may be putting an extra hurdle in front of them. And I think the
person trying to look on everything, I would ask, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence that the fly tipping is excessive?
there is plenty of evidence that fly tipping is excessive. I see it. Sorry?
On to Abbey Ward, mate.
I can tell there is evidence because I'm getting a report from my constituents all the time. Fly tipping is happening. We are having to collect it. We got we're spending a lot of money on collection of picking up, and there's quite a good system in place, but that's counterproductive. So, I mean, I am with Councillor Prosser and Councillor Atwell on the basis that I know you've had to make decisions. Initially, they were about COVID and actually protecting people and sort of keeping, distance and sort of controlling how people went to the waste centre. We're not in that situation, and more and more we won't be. And therefore, I think it's unsustainable that we continue with the same regime. And I would invite the board to sort of, for us to sort of recommend that we formally ask the executive, the cabinet, to re-look at that and actually open up, increase the opening times to a relevant level, which I think sort of you need to work out in terms of what the cost implications are, because as you say, the savings, if those savings are not being made, money will have to be found from somewhere else. So that's something that has to be taken, but it's not sustainable now. We can't have another tip somewhere else because that would be one option, but that would be probably even more costly. But I think therefore opening the opening hour times more would be the way forward. So I would suggest that that's what we recommend as a board. Who would agree with that recommendation?
I'll second that, Chair.
And who would disagree? All right. Okay, so that's the recommendation for you to take away.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take that back.
Yeah. All right, thank you for that. Councillor Pandy asked a question about where is a good practice happening, and is it Herefordshire? If Herefordshire is a good example of where things are happening, can we bring back a report to this board of what is being done by other councils which we can learn from and we're not doing? So if we can bring back a report on that, that'd be helpful for us all, I think.
Absolutely, Chair. We are part of the APSI network, the Association of Public Service Excellence, and they've got plenty of information and reports on what councils are doing to deal with waste, fly tipping, etc. So we can certainly share some of those reports.
That we used to have that. So I commend the better together approach you mentioned. But you were saying that the PPOs might be not totally integrated into that. Is that right? Did I hear you right on that?
No, they're not part of the development phase. So actually, if we think about working in localities, what we need is every officer from every organisation who works with families in a locality to work together. And that would be the ultimate goal for a localities-based approach. The way we are developing this approach in Derby is that Maria Murphy, the Managing Director of Derby Homes, is leading on the approach for us. She's working with Rachel North, the Strategic Director of Communities and Place, and they are getting together some teams from across the councils who are already working in localities, so the neighbourhoods teams, the housing officers, etc., and actually just understanding what the demands are and how the work works at this stage. So my comment about the PPOs not being part of it means they're not involved in this stage of understanding how the work works. We don't know what the future is going to look like, and there's still a lot of work to do to understand that. And I do believe Rachel North has presented at the Scrutiny Board prior some presentations around it. Rachel North has presented around the Better Together, and I think Maria Murphy has also presented on it. So they will no doubt be bringing updates back to boards in the future as the approach develops. And as the approach does develop, the PPOs will absolutely support that approach, but they're not in this initial stage.
Many years. Is that something that's been looked at in terms of your work? And how do we get those bins, particularly in terraced properties, back into the right places rather than left on the street?
Yeah, you're right, Chair, and it's not just a challenge for Derby. When we talk to colleagues in other authorities, it is a challenge, particularly where there's areas where there isn't that much space, or where areas in the rented sector, maybe where the landlords don't make it easy for people to bring their bins out of their properties. So sometimes bins are on streets, not because residents are doing the wrong thing, just because they've got no alternative, and we need to be mindful of that. So just in terms of, to answer your question, what are we doing about that? The Street Pride teams are currently looking at the service in general and looking at, as part of our waste strategy, which strands of the strategy do we need to include, and actually, helping people manage their bins and helping people manage their waste in general is part of that. We do have some officers whose role it is to go out and actually help people with their bins. They're called waste minimisation officers, but they don't just talk about minimisation. They help people if they need extra capacity, etc. So those officers would be best placed to actually help residents who have got these problems. We also have other teams who can support this. So if the issue is bins on streets because the landlord's not made it easy, then we've got teams who would actually work with private landlords to actually deal with some of those issues. So I think this isn't a one-size-fits-all problem, and I think residents will need help and support first before we were to consider enforcing people for leaving their bins out on the street. That said, there are powers available for us to do that if we do have areas where people have got somewhere to put the bins but just aren't putting the bins away. So I think what we need to do, or what we are doing, is currently where we have issues around accessibility and bins on streets, the crews know where they are. As we have rolled out the system, the in-cab system, we're getting better data. So the waste minimisation officers can now follow that data and actually go and talk to residents who the bin crews are actually reporting on the system have got those issues. So the system is really crucial for us in terms of capturing all of that knowledge so we can then formulate a plan to deal with it.
Are you able to bring a report on that to us? Once you've completed, or is it an ongoing thing that you sort of collating
the
intelligence?
rollout of the system is an ongoing thing, but actually we can give you an update on where we are in the future. That won't be a problem. We've got on the proposed work plan some street pride updates. We can incorporate it as part of that.
Okay. Can I thank you, Samantha, for that? I think this is a really good report. It's quite comprehensive, and it's brought to light some issues that helped us to understand it better. And I hope that some of the recommendations we made will assist to provide a better service. Thank you. Okay. Right. The next agenda item is the work programme itself. Agenda item number 7. Who's speaking to this one? Dominic.
Sorry. Yeah, so
I can speak to it, but Dominic.
we had a meeting with the chair and the vice chair just to go through, and we've got quite a list of items for upcoming meetings, but it's just an opportunity for the rest of the board to discuss these items and put forward any others. Thank you.
Yeah. Any comments? I mean, I think what I would say is that the programme, I have spoken to the officers. We've got a number of things set up. Is there anything people want to add, or any comments on the work programme as it's laid out in the paper on item 7? No? Are we okay with that? Yeah. So the recommendation is to note the report. That is the programme we'll be working towards. I think some of the issues, Dominic, we've noted in terms of what papers are going to be brought in the next few papers. If there's anything else the board is interested in getting on the agenda, please let us know.
Is there an opportunity to include in the work?
Do you want to put your...
Is there an opportunity in the to include in the work programme the work that the grounds team are working on with sizing of bins? That actually, is there a time frame we need to dominate that agenda? I think.
Can I just come in, Chair? So that would be part of the street pride development, the work that we're doing around bins, which is September. That's the next meeting, isn't it?
September, yeah. That's right.
Yeah, there'll definitely be progress by September, and what members will be able to see then is that progress and whether we're going down the right track with it. Will it be a finished article by that point? No, but we'll definitely have made progress.
Can I thank everybody for your attendance and your contribution? Thank you.